I'm Bob Heubel from Immersion, and I'm going to talk about some monetization and retention techniques using haptics, which is a bit different than what you would think of when you want to monetize and make some retention upgrades. The first thing that you have to do, how many people here know what haptics is to start with? All right, so a good number, all right. For those of you that don't, what I'm going to do is pass around a couple of tablets here that have Angry Birds. Everybody knows Angry Birds, right? So I'm going to pass one on this side, and my coworker there, actually my boss, Matt Tullis, he's going to pass around the other tablet on the other side. And while I'm talking here about monetization retention, just go through and play the game. And you're going to feel haptics on the gameplay. All right? And I'm going to talk about two studies here, the results from the studies based on putting in feeling into your mobile app. So where do we get this from? So Immersion is a haptics company. We've been licensing haptic technology into Xbox, PlayStation, the racing wheels where you have full force feedback, way back since 1993. And we don't just do gaming, we do automotive, we do medical sims. Anywhere that you want to put a feel into the computer-human interface. That's what we do. All right, so the studies that we're going to be talking about are not just your standard vibe. This isn't just turning the motor on and turning it off. What we have here from the studies are predefined effects from a library. So Immersion knows it's not the easiest thing to take up any kind of developer time trying to create milliseconds, little time fragments of vibration. So what we do is we made a library of certain very specific feelings that you find in the developers that want to put vibration into games. So we work with folks like Sega, Rockstar, Rovio, and we know what kind of vibration patterns they want in the games. Some are explosions, some are very subtle racing effects or nitro effects going on. A lot are weapon effects, where you want to feel a pistol, it feels different than a shotgun, a laser rifle, anything like that. So it's not just your standard vibe, it's pre-made effects that went into the games into this study. We call this touch sense technology. And what we've done for the studies, and we continue to do, is the library is free. The vibration patterns are free. We basically make our money on the hardware side of the business, licensing to the Logitechs and Microsofts out there. But what we're looking for is more data. So the data that you see here, if you're a game developer and you want to experience it for yourself, we give a free license for the library in exchange for the data that are in reports like this. All right, so enough about that. The first study is from Orbital Games. It was an A/B test where half of the users, they had the game with the haptics built into the gameplay, and the other half did not. And we did a comparison over 90 days. The sample size was fairly small, so 1,200 DAU. And the focus of the study was specifically on retention and user satisfaction here. And we're collecting the matrix on a daily basis. The game itself is a social casino game, so solitaire slots, where they're using metaphorical cards, but it's set up as a slot machine mechanism. So you get to feel things like the spinning reels of the slot machine falling into place, as well as vibration effects for the rewards. So the impact of the study, we saw that there was more retention, and by that we mean that more people return to the game more often. And for the engagement, users with the haptics played more rounds, and they got deeper into the game. So they went into more levels of the game. And the enjoyment factor of it, they were willing to spend game currency to increase the odds of winning what were very tactile rewards. So you had to get so far into the game to unlock some of these tactile sensations. So let's look at the numbers a little bit here. So when we're talking about more rounds started, we saw about a 3% increase in the rounds, but the 14-day retention was up 20% over the non-haptic versions. And as far as paying, and these are first-time payers, they were 13% more likely to pay in the haptic version. And it's not that some were playing with haptics and all of a sudden they had haptics on and they started going that way. This was a very side-by-side comparison. Half users didn't know anything about haptics. They didn't have any experience of feeling in their game. And what we were comparing was a whole nother group that had the feeling in the game. The second study that we had was similar, but it was with Game House. This game was called Slingo Shuffle. It's a social casino game. And it's free to play, like the other game, free to play. And it had a bingo mechanism in it. So it wasn't solitaire kind of game, but it was more bingo, you call out a number sort of thing. But it did have the same sort of slot machine action going along to monetize on it. And again, we did the same thing where you had 50% with the haptics and 50% without the haptics. And this study was about 9,600 daily active users. And we were using game analytics. Anybody here using game analytics for their analytics? So standard kind of game analytics that we were using to collect on a daily basis. And what we found here, same thing with the retention and the engagement and the enjoyment going up. Numbers are similar, but let's look at them. So here, the monetization drivers that we had, they had more first-time buyers per install, 4%, and the in-app purchases, they went up more as well by 6%. Now, these are small studies, so we've got little footnotes here that say that wouldn't necessarily be significant if we're removing the top 2% of the gamers in there. But still, fairly good for 4%, 6% increase there. Now, note here, the in-app purchases, the amount of money actually went down, the in-app purchases. But because you had more people that were playing the game longer over the session time, it actually accounted for more install revenue. Almost 4.6%. It went from 25 cents per user to 27 cents per user in a very small type of game. And what we also see, we were testing to see sound versus haptics. So how many people turn off the audio in their game when they're playing it? A lot of people end up turning off this audio. However, audio is considered very significant for the gameplay. It doesn't necessarily generate more revenue, but what we find is a lot of people turn it off. This isn't the same with the haptic side of it. People tend to leave the feeling of the game on more than they do the audio. You see here about a 3% increase for turning haptics off versus the audio on it. And would anybody know why people tend to turn everything off outside of just not wanting to bother somebody? We found it's generally because they're trying to save their battery, right? And you think about audio over haptics, which one's going to use more power? Is it going to be the haptics or going to be the sound on it? Actually, the haptic side of it uses about the same as audio. If you take something like a Samsung Galaxy class device that has a linear resonant actuator in there, it really doesn't consume that much power. It's about 1% of the overall power drain in the system. But still, people want to save every little bit they can. But we found in this study specifically that while tracking the audio and the haptics, more people tend to turn off the audio than the haptics. All right, so from these two studies, we see basically the same sort of thing. We're getting people that are playing longer, they're playing more often, which equates to better retention, and players tend to spend more money through the in-app purchases specifically. And they're more engaged with the haptics than they are for the audio side of it. And again, this is using the TouchSense type of vibration. It's not just your standard buzz on and off. Where are the demos at the moment? How far have they've gotten up here? So they're not in too far down on the rows, but you should really try out the experience that's coming down there for Angry Birds so that you get the feeling of what we're talking about for haptics. Most of you out there, I'm sure, have had the chance to play on a console or play on the VR where you have the haptic sensations for the gameplay. The rumble pads that are out there with the big and small motor and the rumble pads have been around for years. What we have learned is that you can take that same sensation, and it's a very nice transition into mobile. It's very easy to do. It takes about 2 days to put it in. But what we didn't know, which was never tested on the console side, is that you can actually monetize off of this. It's a natural fit going from the console space over to mobile. And so we still need more data, and that's what I'm prefacing here, is that however, more testing is needed. We need larger DAU groups, and what we're doing for the library as it stands now, for probably the next year, maybe 2, depending on how long it takes to get the data, is we're giving the library out free. You can use it in your development platform, and we want to collect the data and get more reports like this and show that it's not just in this category of social gaming for casino, but it can apply across all the genres, whether it's Rockstar's Grand Theft Auto that has haptics in there, or it's Sega's Sonic titles that have the haptics in there, or the Angry Birds. We need more genres to really prove out that this feeling of the game can help you retain users and also generate more revenue from the users that you're getting. And that's all I have here, but I also want to let you know that beyond this method of monetizing, how many people are doing ads in their game? You doing any video ads? So there is also a method for putting haptics into the video ads. Right now, our partners are Opera. So you've got Opera and also Teads that are using this in their methods. So if you use basically Ad Colony, which is the Opera Media Works, they have a method for taking any kind of video ad that you have and sticking haptic profiles in there so that when the video plays back, you can key up every event that you want in there to associate feeling with. So if it's a car commercial, you can feel the revving of the engines. If it's a can of pop that's opening, you can feel the pop. If it's your game and you've got the effects in the game, that's fine, that's great. You're going to monetize that way. But even if you don't go through the effort of adding some effects into your game, we find that viewers that are looking at a video clip of any kind of ad, they pay more attention to it. The click-through rates are higher, and the share rates are higher. So if you guys are interested in the ad side of it, you can also look me up, send me an email, and I can give you more details about that, because that is another way you can monetize through your app. And do we have time for questions?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Any questions? Yeah.
Can you do too much haptic feedback?
Oh my God, absolutely. So if your device is just vibrating the whole time, that's horrible. And working with all the developers that I have over the years, it's interesting to see how many developers are very good at programming. They can put the code in very quickly. Sometimes when I'm giving a lecture on how to put the haptics into the gameplay, before I'm done with my session, somebody's already programmed it into their game. It's very simple that way. But choosing the moments where to put the haptics in and what that feeling should be, that takes more time. And that's where Immersion is an expert. So what we typically do with the game developers, we'll play their game. And we'll say event A, B, C, D. Like for Angry Birds, you're pulling back the bird to catapult it out. That's a natural spot to have it. Or the collisions, when everything's collapsing. It's good to feel things there, but not in everything. So, for example, in Angry Birds, if you felt it, you're not feeling the collapsing of all the blocks, but you are feeling when the bad piggies explode, right? You feel a catapult shot going, you feel the bad piggies exploding. There's some special animations of the special characters, like in Angry Birds Friends, that say one of them blows up like a balloon, and you have a little hum that happens as it expands and goes flying off. The explosions, there's some exploding birds where you get the exploding portion of that. But take an example of a racing game. You can have a car where you can feel the car the whole time, right? The revving engine, everything going on with it. And that would be too much. You don't want to feel that the whole time. But if you step back and say, okay, well, I want to feel the shifting the shifting that I do with it. Or I want to feel only when I get a nitro blast and the car goes flying down the road. Those are the elements that you want to have as what we call wow factors. Otherwise, nothing's going to be special about it. And it's the same way with console. They don't necessarily have rumble all over the place. They have it when you're taking damage. They have it when you're firing a weapon. In a racing game for, well, like Need for Speed, you're going to feel, if you go off-road, you're going to feel the bumpiness of that. You're going to feel some gear changes, collisions. So if you take the same sort of events that you would do in console and you apply them to the mobile game, it makes sense. What's different from the console side to the mobile side is that there are many more casual games in the mobile space. So say you've got Connect 3. You're like, well, what would I feel within a Connect 3? Or like a King game, right? Like Candy Crush, anything like this. If you're making the connection, you can just have a simple UI interaction where you're feeling the tick, tick, tick as it goes down, or a completion of a set of blocks that goes off, or a reward for finishing the session. In the Angry Birds sessions there, in each one of the levels, at the end, you get a star. Or you get 3 stars, however many stars you happen to get for that level. And you can add a little effect for a little pop, pop, pop for each one of the stars coming out, just as a special little reward. You wouldn't necessarily have that in a console game. Does that make sense? Yes?
So what operating systems or game engines do libraries?
Excuse me, very good question. So the TouchSense library is specifically for Android right now, and it's for any Android system out there. There's plugins for Unity that are very easy, but also native code. So if you want to do it that way, it's all fine too. iOS is a bit more locked down. You can't do as much with the vibration commands in there. However, since iPhone 7, they also have a few pre-made vibration patterns. They have about 7 of them. They're not very subtle. They're not meant really to be subtle, but you can use those for things like collisions and explosions. You might want to look into that if you want to do the same experience on both platforms of iOS and Android. Although you can do a lot more on the Android side, it's a little more open. If you want something that's a little more consistent for your users, you might want to apply it to both.